I always thought that the worst kind of loneliness was being alone. I was wrong. The worst kind of loneliness is lying beside someone every night who looks right through you, who chuckles at messages he tries to hide, who smells of perfume you've never worn. I once had a name. I once had dreams. Now I was the old wife, invisible in my own home. The laughter echoing from his mouth used to comfort me. Now it sounded like betrayal. My name is Eleanor. I'm 67 years old. I have late-stage rheumatoid arthritis, and I move with the help of a cane and painkillers that dull more than just my bones. The woman you see now isn't who I used to be. I used to teach literature at a local college. I used to bake on Sundays, and I used to smile. But everything started to unravel 5 years ago when I discovered my husband Charles had found hobbies outside our marriage. It wasn't just one woman. It was many. Young women laughing loudly in restaurants where he never took me. I saw the receipts. I saw the phone bills. I saw the lipstick that wasn't mine. But the worst part, he never even tried to hide it well, like he assumed I was too tired, too sick, or too stupid to notice. And maybe for a while, I was. He was 10 years older than me, but you wouldn't know it. While I shriveled in silence, he bloomed in deceit. Our house became his playground and my prison. Friends stopped visiting. He stopped coming home before midnight. And when he did, the scent on his shirt told stories I was too tired to retell. I tried to ask once. His eyes didn't even flinch. He simply smiled, said I was imagining things again, then left for another business dinner. That night, I sat at the edge of the bathtub holding a bottle of painkillers and wondering how many it would take to feel nothing. But I didn't do it. Not because I was brave, but because something inside me whispered, not like this. Not with him thinking he won. Not with me being a footnote in his grand story. That was the night I made a silent vow. I wouldn't disappear. I wouldn't break. Not yet. He had written the first half of the story. But I would write the ending. The next morning, I forced myself out of bed, my joints stiff and soul heavier than ever. I made him breakfast like I always did, eggs over easy toast with marmalade black coffee with 2 sugars. He didn't thank me. He never did anymore. Just glanced at his phone, chuckled at a message, then kissed the top of my head with lips that reeked of another woman's perfume. "You're a saint for putting up with me," he joked. I smiled. I wanted to scream. The days blurred into each other. I stopped dressing up, stopped combing my hair, stopped reading. I stopped being me. The only routine I held on to was watering the violets on the windowsill. He once said they reminded him of me, fragile, soft, easy to forget. Every evening I waited for him, sometimes until midnight, sometimes until morning. The click of the door always made my heart skip, hopeful, stupid little heart, until I saw his face. Sometimes he smelled like wine, sometimes like sweat, never like home. He stopped sleeping in our bed, said he snored too loud. I heard giggles through the wall. There were times I curled up in the closet just to cry without being heard. I didn't want his pity. I didn't want to be a burden. I wanted to vanish. I looked in the mirror and saw a ghost with sunken cheeks and empty eyes. Depression wrapped itself around me like a weighted blanket I couldn't shake off. But still I said nothing. I feared his anger. I feared his indifference even more. Then came the day that broke me. I found a box in his study hidden behind his old vinyl records. Inside were Polaroids. Dozens. Him, with different women in different hotels on different holidays I'd never been invited to. Each photo a dagger. He was younger in some, happier in all. And in none of them was I even a thought. I took the box, crawled into the linen closet, and sobbed until my ribs hurt. I don't know how long I stayed there. An hour, maybe 3. When I emerged, my legs numb, I returned the box to its place untouched, unspoken, because I still didn't know why. Why stay married to me if he wanted someone else? Why let me rot while he danced? I was trapped in my own body, in his house, in his shadow. I started to forget things. Doctor's appointments, my favorite authors, the names of former students I once forgot to eat for 2 days. He didn't notice. But one night, as I sat staring at a flickering candle, a thought tiptoed into my mind. What if I turned the pain into purpose? I wish I could tell you that everything changed overnight. But that's not how depression works. It lingers. It eats at you slowly, making you question everything, especially your own worth. My body betrayed me every morning with pain, and my mind whispered that maybe Charles was right to look elsewhere. Maybe I had become too old, too quiet, too broken. I began to withdraw completely. I stopped going outside. Stopped answering calls from my sister, from my old friend Clara. Even the mail piled up untouched. Charles didn't ask. He didn't even notice when I stopped speaking at dinner. The few times he looked my way, it was with impatience, like I was a loose end he hadn't gotten around to trimming. Then came the pneumonia. It was brutal. My body, already weak, couldn't fight. I was bedridden for nearly 3 weeks. I burned with fever, coughed until I couldn't breathe. And still he didn't take me to the hospital. He called a nurse once, then vanished for 5 days. When I finally regained consciousness, I was alone in the bedroom, an untouched bowl of soup congealed on the nightstand. The violets on the sill had wilted. I looked like death in the mirror. And it hit me if I had died, he wouldn't have known until the stench. That realization did something to me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply stared at myself, and for the first time in a long time, I felt rage. It started as a low simmer in my gut. A betrayal not just of love, but of basic decency. He had left me to die. Like an animal too old to be useful. That wasn't just cruel. That was evil. The next morning I got dressed. Not just in anything, but in my old crimson wool dress, the one he used to say made me look too ambitious. I brushed my hair, put on lipstick that had expired years ago, and I walked slowly, shakily to the breakfast table. He blinked when he saw me, as if confused by the effort. "Going somewhere?" he asked. "Yes," I replied softly. "Back to life." He laughed, poured his coffee, and muttered something about me being dramatic. But that morning I made a decision. He had taken years of my life, drained my joy, erased my identity, and I had let him. But I still had one thing left: time. And I was going to use it. That week I began rebuilding. I called Clara back. I apologized for disappearing. She cried. I cried harder. I opened old journals and reminded myself who I once was. And one day I sat at the window and whispered aloud, "I'm not done. And God help Charles." Because neither was my story. The first time I stepped outside alone again, it was spring. The sun stung my pale skin, and the breeze felt foreign on my face. I stood at the edge of our porch, clutching my cane, staring at the world I'd ignored for too long. Neighbors had changed. Trees had grown. I had shriveled. But I took that step, then another. I walked 2 blocks and sat at a small park bench near the pharmacy. And that's where I saw him. Daniel. He used to teach history 2 doors down from my old literature class. We hadn't spoken in over a decade. But the moment our eyes met, he smiled genuinely warmly, the way no one had smiled at me in years. "Eleanor?" he asked, tilting his head. My lips trembled. "It's me." He sat beside me like no time had passed. We talked for an hour. He told me about his wife's passing, his travels, his passion for painting that had taken over his retirement. When I told him about Charles, only the parts I could bear to say, he looked at me, not with pity, but with fury. "He left you to rot," Daniel said plainly. "That's not just neglect. That's cruelty." That word stuck with me. Cruelty. It wasn't a word I had let myself use before. It felt too final, too harsh. But hearing it from someone else validated the storm I'd buried for years. That conversation lit something in me. I met Daniel again the next week. And the week after that. Not romantically, though he was still charming, but as someone who reminded me that I was seen. I began walking daily, eating again, reading again. I even bought a new dress, one with sunflowers, just because it made me smile. And slowly I started gathering evidence. The old Polaroids, the credit card statements, the love notes I had once ignored. I made digital copies, cataloged them neatly in folders, and wrote a letter. Not a bitter, angry rant, but a calm, precise timeline of neglect affairs and lies. Then I reached out to the one group Charles still cared about, his professional society. The one that was planning his lavish retirement celebration. I had once attended those galas as the doting wife quiet in his shadow. But this time, I planned to arrive not as his +1, but as the finale. I wasn't going to scream, I wasn't going to cry, I wasn't going to beg. I was going to reveal, publicly, elegantly, unforgettably. Let the man who laughed through my pain finally learn what it meant to be humiliated by someone he underestimated. The dress I chose for that night, crimson wool, just like the woman he once told to tone it down. The evening of Charles's retirement gala arrived faster than I expected. My heart thundered beneath my ribs like a war drum, but my hands were steady. Clara helped me zip up the crimson wool dress. She squeezed my shoulder and whispered, "Tonight, you reclaim yourself." I hadn't told her everything but enough for her to stand behind me when it mattered most. The banquet hall was opulent. Chandeliers glittered overhead. A string quartet played some pretentious Vivaldi, and the smell of roasted duck wafted through the room. Everyone was dressed to impress, clinking champagne glasses, praising the man of the hour. Charles stood at the center, radiant and smug in his tailored suit. He hadn't noticed me arrive. Good. I made my way to the reserved table, our table nodding at familiar faces who blinked, astonished to see me there. "Eleanor," one whispered. "You look amazing." "Thank you," I said, smiling politely, though my heart screamed, "Watch closely." The program began with boring speeches. Colleagues praising his commitment, juniors sharing awkward jokes, even a slideshow of Charles's career highlights. I nearly choked when one slide showed him hugging me from 20 years ago. Then came the final speech, his own. He took the stage with the confidence of a man who believed he'd won life. He thanked his peers, bragged about his investments, and gave a charming nod to me, my ever-patient wife, who has stood by me through thick and thin. My turn. I rose slowly. The room quieted. "I have something to share," I said, into the microphone voice, even face calm. "A gift for Charles." I pulled out a small remote from my purse and clicked it. The projector behind him flickered. At first, it showed our wedding photo. Applause. Smiles. Then another photo, Charles with a brunette in a hotel robe. Laughter died. Then another Charles kissing a redhead by the poolside. Whispers. Another Charles slipping jewelry onto a woman's hand that wasn't mine. Gasps. I turned to the crowd, still calm. For years, while I struggled with illness, depression, and abandonment, this man, the one you're celebrating, treated our marriage vows like a joke. He left me to rot while he played house with women half my age. The silence was deafening. Charles stammered something, reaching for the remote, but I held it high. This isn't vengeance, I continued. It's truth. You all deserve to know the man behind the mask. And Charles, you deserve to know what it feels like to be seen clearly. At last, I left the stage to stunned silence. I didn't stay for dessert. Didn't need to. The damage was done clean, honest, and irreversible. And for the first time in years, I walked away not as a victim, but as a woman who had chosen her ending. I expected him to come home furious, hurling blame like he always did. But Charles didn't even walk through the front door. Not that night. Not the next day. Instead, I got a call from his assistant, a mumbled apology, and the note that Charles would be staying at a hotel indefinitely. He never dared to face me. Word of the gala spread like wildfire. His colleagues distanced themselves overnight. A few wives even sent me quiet messages of solidarity, their own suspicions suddenly sharpened by my public reveal. His retirement fund, the one he'd so arrogantly boasted about, was frozen during an internal ethics investigation. Apparently, some of his romantic retreats were billed as business expenses. Oops! I didn't rejoice. I didn't dance. I watered my violets. I brewed tea. And I exhaled for the first time in years without feeling the weight of him pressing down on my soul. Weeks passed. Then one afternoon, the doorbell rang. It was Charles. Thinner, pale, suit wrinkled. He clutched a duffel bag in one hand and a bouquet of wilting carnations in the other. "Eleanor," he rasped, I have nowhere else to go." I studied him, this once proud man now hollowed by truth. His hands trembled. His eyes pleaded. He looked old, but I didn't feel pity. I felt clarity. "I kept your old bedroom just the way it was," I said quietly. "You'll find it upstairs to the left." His eyes lit up. "Right next to the guest room." His smile froze. "You're welcome to stay. Until you find something more permanent," I continued. "But this house is mine now. You'll live here as a guest, not as a husband. Those days are over." He nodded, jaw tightening. I didn't slam the door in his face. I didn't scream. That would have made him the center again, and he no longer deserved that power. That night he shuffled up to his room with his head low. I listened to the creak of the stairs, the soft sigh of a man who had finally lost everything except the woman he once discarded. And in the stillness of my own room, wrapped in a soft blanket with a book in my lap, I allowed myself a small, quiet smile. Not of revenge, of release. I had spent years as a ghost in my own life. But I was flesh now. I was voice and spine and fire. Charles might still share my roof, but he no longer shared my story. That I reclaimed, that I rewrote. And this time I was the author. If you're reading this and see a reflection of your own pain in my story, let me offer you this. You are not weak for staying, and you are not cruel for leaving. You are human. I spent too many years believing that suffering quietly was noble, that enduring betrayal with grace somehow made me stronger. But silence is not strength. Endurance is not the same as living. What Charles did to me was more than infidelity, it was erasure. And for a long time I let him do it. I convinced myself I was too old to start over, too sick to matter, too broken to fight back. But I was wrong. There is always a spark left, even in ashes. So, if you are hurting, let my story be your sign you can reclaim your voice, your power, and your ending on your terms. You are not invisible, and you are never too late to begin again.